The ocean gives us life, trade, travel, resources, yet when massive ships fail, the cost isn't just in dollars. It's in lives, ecosystems, and lessons written in blood and oil. Today, we bring you the story of two maritime disasters, one that changed American environmental law and another that remains Asia's worst peacetime sea tragedy. This is the legacy of the Exxon Valdez oil spill and the haunting fire of the Doña Paz ferry disaster. March 24th, 1989, Prince William Sound, Alaska. The Exxon Valdez, a 300-meter oil tanker loaded with 53 million gallons of crude oil, leaves the Valdez Marine Terminal en route to California. But just after midnight, disaster strikes. The ship runs aground on Bligh Reef, tearing open its hull. 11 million gallons of oil gush into the icy waters. The spill covers 1,300 miles of shoreline, suffocates marine life, and becomes a symbol of ecological ruin. But the disaster wasn't just bad luck. The radar, broken for over a year. The crew, fatigued, understaffed. The captain, allegedly intoxicated and not on the bridge. Public anger exploded. Images of oil-soaked seabirds and dead otters flooded TV screens. Fishing town lost their income. Native Alaskan communities suffered for decades. Exxon would spend $2 billion on cleanup, but the damage was already done. In the aftermath, America took action. The Oil Pollution Act of 1990, OPA 90, changed maritime oil transport forever. All new tankers in U.S. waters must have double hulls. Operators became fully liable for cleanup and damages. Tankers must carry contingency plans and oil spill response teams. A National Oil Spill Response Trust Fund was created. OPA 90 became the global gold standard, forcing oil companies to prioritize safety or pay the price. December 20, 1987, Tablas Strait, Philippines. The MV Doña Paz, a passenger ferry headed to Manila, sails through calm seas, carrying families home for Christmas. On board, officially, 1,493 passengers, but in reality, over 4,000 people, many undocumented. At 10:30 p.m., it collides with the MT Vector, a tanker carrying petroleum and gasoline, but operating without a license, with an unqualified crew and malfunctioning equipment. The collision ignites Vector's cargo. Flames spread instantly across the sea. The Doña Paz becomes a floating inferno. Survivors describe people jumping into the flaming water, some burning alive, others trapped inside as the ferry lights up the night like a funeral pyre. Out of more than 4,000 souls aboard, only 24 survived. 386 lives lost, more than the Titanic, more than the Lusitania. Investigators found that Doña Paz was operating illegally overloaded. There were no life vests available, no real evacuation procedures, and no radio contact. Doña Paz didn't even have a working radio. The Vector, meanwhile, wasn't supposed to be on the water at all. The disaster shocked the Philippines and forced maritime authorities to confront the truth. Overloading kills. Crew qualifications matter. Safety checks aren't optional. In response, Marina and PCG, Philippine Coast Guard, initiated reforms. Stricter manifest audits, mandatory safety drills, regular vessel inspections, suspension of non-compliant operators. Yet even today, enforcement remains a challenge in many parts of the world. From the frozen coasts of Alaska to the burning waters of Tablas Strait, these two disasters tell the same story. When greed outruns safety, the sea becomes a graveyard. The Exxon Valdez forced the world to reimagine oil transport safety. The Doña Paz revealed how neglect, corruption, and overloading can burn through thousands of lives in minutes. These tragedies are not just maritime history. They're warnings. Every regulation exists because of a life lost. Every safety drill is written in the memory of someone who never made it home. If we forget the past, we sail blind into the future. But if we remember, maybe the next generation will never have to learn these lessons in fire and oil. When ships collide and lives are lost, the world looks for someone to blame. But in these tragedies, Exxon Valdez, Doña Paz, and Vector, did justice ever find its way to the bridge? Joseph Hazelwood, the captain of the Exxon Valdez, became the face of the disaster, though he wasn't on the bridge at the time of the grounding, having left command to his third mate. Hazelwood had been drinking the night before. A blood test taken hours after the spill still showed traces of alcohol. He was charged with 3 felonies and misdemeanors, including operating a vessel while intoxicated. But in court, he was acquitted of the felony charges, including being drunk at the time of the accident. He was convicted only of misdemeanor negligence, fined $50,000, and sentenced to 1,000 hours of community service. Hazelwood never captained again. He left the maritime profession permanently. To this day, many see his light sentence as a symbol of corporate protection. Exxon paid billions, but the man at the helm walked free. But who actually caused the grounding of the Exxon Valdez? While Captain Joseph Hazelwood was the face of the disaster, he was not on the bridge at the time the ship ran aground on Bligh Reef. Gregory Cousins was the officer of the watch during the critical navigation period. He was left in charge of the bridge while the captain went to his stateroom. He failed to properly maneuver the vessel back into the shipping lane after deviating course to avoid icebergs. But here's the catch. Cousins was licensed, qualified, and sober. The real issue was crew fatigue, lack of adequate rest, and management failure. Captain Hazelwood gave verbal orders to return to the traffic lane but didn't supervise their execution. The radar was broken and had been for over a year. The ship was operating with a reduced crew due to cost cutting, leaving Cousins without enough bridge support. Exxon's management culture was focused on profit over safety, leading to poor staffing and excessive work hours. Legal outcome. Gregory Cousins was never charged. He testified in the trials and was not found criminally responsible. Hazelwood became the public scapegoat, although many experts blame systemic failure. Exxon's policies, fatigue, equipment issues, not just one man. At the time of the grounding of the Exxon Valdez, the third mate, Gregory Cousins, was effectively alone on the bridge, with no proper lookout and no helmsman assisting him. This was a critical violation of basic maritime watchkeeping protocols. No proper lookout. The vessel was required to have an additional watchman, typically an able-bodied seaman or helmsman, as a lookout, especially during night navigation and narrow channel maneuvering. Standard bridge team protocol would include officer of the watch, third mate, helmsman or helmsman on standby, even if autopilot is used. He will serve as lookout/watchman, especially in reduced visibility or high-risk areas. But during that critical maneuvering period, no lookout was posted on the bridge. According to testimony and investigation reports, Gregory Cousins was alone on the bridge, monitoring the radar, communicating with other vessels, and responsible for executing a complex turn back into the shipping lane. He was overwhelmed and missed the turn, leading the ship to run aground. In maritime terms, this is a textbook example of fatigue and undermanning. But why was there no lookout? Exxon had cut crew levels significantly in the years leading up to the disaster. Union complaints had already been made about excessive hours and unsafe manning. The able-bodied seaman who should have been on the bridge was reportedly doing other work elsewhere on the ship at the time. This was not an accident of the moment. It was the result of systemic understaffing, poor oversight, and cost-cutting by Exxon. The investigation findings, NTSB and USCG. Primary cause, failure of the third mate to properly maneuver the vessel. The contributing causes, lack of a proper watch, no lookout, fatigue due to excessive work hours, inadequate oversight by the captain, inoperable radar system, company failure to ensure safe manning. But what happened to the captain and crew of MV Doña Paz? Unlike Exxon Valdez, no one survived from the Doña Paz's bridge crew, not the captain, not the officers, not even the radio operator, because the ship didn't have a working radio. The investigation revealed that no distress call was ever sent, and no attempt to evacuate was effectively made. Since there were no living crew members to testify or defend their actions, the tragedy raised more questions than answers, and exposed a complete failure in training, communication, and emergency preparedness. The crew of MT Vector, charges and sentences. The tanker MT Vector, which collided with the Doña Paz and triggered the Inferno, had several surviving crew members. Investigators found that the Vector was operating without a license, its officers were unqualified, and the vessel was in poor mechanical condition. The Philippine government charged the owners of Vector and surviving crew with criminal negligence. While details are limited, it's known that several Vector crew members were arrested. The ship's owner faced civil lawsuits and corporate penalties. There were no major long-term prison sentences, and many families of victims still feel justice was never served. The Vector quietly faded into maritime history, but for thousands of grieving families, it was a ship that should never have been at sea. Justice at sea? In the world of maritime disaster, justice is rarely clear-cut. Captains like Hazelwood faced courtrooms but walked away. Crews like those aboard the Doña Paz died before questions could be asked. And ships like the Vector sailed under the radar until it was too late. These stories remind us, when safety is ignored, everyone pays, but not always equally. If you believe safety at sea matters, share this story. Subscribe for more maritime history and real-life lessons from the ocean's darkest days and the people behind the headlines. Subscribe to learn more about the stories behind the regulations.